In this video, I'll show you exactly how to build a financial dashboard in Claude and automate it in a way where you don't have to manually fix it every time new data comes in. Because the problem is not building the dashboard. The problem is what happens the month after. A new ERP export lands and it's maybe messy. Columns maybe don't match, dates are all over the place, labels are inconsistent. So then you have to go in and fix it manually. And then the next month, you're doing the exact same thing again. The dashboard looks automated, but the process behind it is still completely manual. And what I'm going to show you today is how to remove that repeating layer entirely. We're not automating the dashboard itself. You build that once. What we're automating is everything behind it. So instead of fixing data every month, raw ERP files just drop into a folder. They get cleaned the same way every time, and they flow into one structured data set that the dashboard reads from. Now, if you want the prompts and you want the data sets from this video, everything is free in my community, which is linked in the description below. Setting up the project. Before we can actually build an automated dashboard, the project itself needs to be set up correctly inside Claude. And that means creating the folder structure that the system will read from and then write to, and connecting that folder to Claude Cowork so that the AI can access everything in one single place. Now, getting this right up front is what allows every later step to run cleanly and smoothly. Now, the project folder is called Automate Financial Reporting. Inside it, there are three subfolders. The input folder is where the raw ERP Excel reports will land every month. The data folder is where the clean CSV is stored once the first run happens. And then the logs folder will record what happened during each run, which file was processed, how many rows were cleaned, and whether anything was skipped. Alongside these folders, there is one instruction file called cleaner.md. Now, this file tells the system how to process a raw ERP export from start all the way to finish. It specifies which sheet to read from the Excel file, how to standardize inconsistent column names into a fixed structure, how to normalize date formats, which rows to remove, and how to append only new rows into the existing CSV without duplicating anything. Now, a second instruction file comes in later once the dashboard is built, and that one handles the automation layer. But for now, cleaner.md is the only instruction file in the project. I open Claude Cowork, I click Work in a project, I then choose a different folder, navigate to the Automate Financial Reporting directory, and I click Select. A permission pop-up appears and I click Always Allow. Now, the system now has access to the full project folder, including the cleaner file. With the project set up, we can then move on to the actual data. Cleaning the ERP data. The ERP files I am using are 3 monthly exports from a company called ABC Manufacturing Limited for January, February, and March 2024. Now, each file has the same 3 sheets: transactions, summary, and metadata. Now, the transaction sheet is the one that matters because that is where the business data sits and where the messiness shows up. What makes this data realistic is that it is genuinely inconsistent. The revenue column shows up under names, and the dates are written in 4 different formats, and the department labels are in every case you can imagine. So you can see the examples on screen now. Now, if you feed this directly into a dashboard, the charts are going to break, or they'll produce silent calculation errors that nobody catches. So that's exactly why we clean it first. I type follow the instructions in cleaner.md into the Claude Cowork task window, and then I press enter. Now, the system reads the January file, it selects the transaction sheet, maps the inconsistent column names to a fixed 6-column structure, and then it normalizes every value. All dates are formatted in one consistent manner. Department and product labels get standardized. Rows with missing revenue or missing dates get removed. Then the cleaner checks whether a CSV already exists in the data folder. Since this is the first run, nothing exists yet. The system creates a dashboard data CSV from scratch and it saves it into the data folder. Now, I open the file and the difference is immediate. Every column is in the same order, the same labels, every date is in the same format, and every row follows the same structure. And this is what makes the rest of the system possible. Every future run will append into this same file instead of replacing it, which means the history builds up month by month, and the dashboard can show real trends instead of just 1 month snapshots. Now with one clean month of data ready to go, we can now build a dashboard on top of it. Building the dashboard. Now this is the part most people think of when they hear financial dashboard, and it's also the part that only needs to be built once. The whole point of what we set up earlier is that every future month will feed into the same dashboard without anyone having to rebuild it. I stay in the same Claude cowork task and I give it the dashboard prompt. It defines the structure the dashboard needs to have, broken into 3 distinct layers. First, the data contract, file location to read from, and the 6 columns the data will contain. Second, the visual layout, which includes the KPI cards at the top, the trend charts, the breakdown charts by region and product and department, and the sortable transaction table at the bottom. Third, the interaction layer, which is the filter bar across the top for date range, region, product, and department, plus a manual CSV upload button as a fallback. Now, the whole thing ships as a single self-contained HTML file using chart.js, so it runs in any browser without a backend. The reason the prompt defines the structure this explicitly is that the dashboard has to stay the same every month while the underlying dataset grows. Leave the layout and the calculations undefined, and every rebuild produces slightly different output, which will slightly break month-over-month comparisons. Locking the structure in the prompt means the dashboard gets built once and then never gets rebuilt, which is the whole point of this setup. The system builds the HTML file, writes the layout, adds the chart configuration, wires up the filters, and saves the file into the workspace. I open it in a browser, and one thing here worth being direct about is that the dashboard does not pull the CSV automatically on its first load the way the prompt specified. I had to click the upload button and then point it at the clean file before the numbers appeared. But after that, it worked as expected. Now, once the file is loaded, the dashboard renders with the full January view. Now, the revenue trend and the profit trend charts show the day-by-day movement across January, and since the dataset only covers 1 month right now, the trend is short. The revenue by region chart shows APAC leading, followed by the EU, then US, with an unknown bucket appearing because some rows in the raw file had missing regions and the cleaner preserved rather than hid them. Then I start using the filters to show how the dashboard responds. First, I apply a region filter and select US, and the whole dashboard updates. Then I clear the region filter and change the date range to January 9th through January 20th, and the numbers shift again. So the dashboard is now built and it's ready for future months. The only thing left is making sure that new data actually gets into it without anyone touching the process. Automating the updates. Now this is where the second instruction file comes in. I add automation.md to the project folder alongside cleaner.md. And this new file does not contain any cleaning logic. It only is there to watch the input folder, to detect when a new file has been added, and then to trigger cleaner.md to run. Now it also tracks which files have already been processed using the logs folder so that the same file never gets cleaned twice. Now keeping these separate means that there is only one place where the cleaning logic lives, which is what makes the system consistent across every single run. Now to run the automation continuously rather than on a fixed schedule, I use Claude code from the terminal. Now this way, the system reacts as soon as new data lands in the input folder instead of waiting on a timer. Now one thing to flag before this step, you do need Claude code installed and signed in on your machine first. If it is not already set up, then install it and then come back to this process. Now, I open the terminal inside the project folder and I type Claude to confirm the environment is ready. The interface appears immediately. Then I run a simple loop that executes the automation instruction every 10 seconds and checks the input folder for new files. The exact command is on screen. Now for this demo, I'm using a 10-second interval to show the behavior, but in practice, you would run it at a much longer interval depending on how often new files actually arrive. Now on the first pass, the loop checks the input folder, it compares what it sees against the logs, and then it finds that the January file has already been processed. Then it exits cleanly without doing anything, because good automation knows when to do nothing. Now the real test is what happens when a new file actually shows up. The monthly loop. This is where the whole system pays off. Everything we built earlier, the folder structure, the cleaner, the dashboard, and the automation layer only matters if the process actually runs on its own when new data arrives. So let me show you exactly that happening. Now with the loop running in the background, I drop the February ERP file into the input folder. I do not touch the terminal. I do not re-explain anything. I just literally add the file. And then within a few seconds, the next pass of the loop detects the new file and it hands off to cleaner.md. Then everything runs through the exact same cleaning logic defined earlier in the first section, which is what keeps the output consistent. Now the terminal shows the full breakdown. The cleaned data gets added into the existing CSV. The January data stays exactly where it was. The February rows land underneath it, and the data set is now 74 rows. The file is growing instead of being rebuilt. Now this is where the strict rules inside cleaner.md matter. The instruction file explicitly tells the system not to overwrite the full data set, not to change the column structure, and to not add extra columns, and only append new rows. Now those rules exist because this is exactly where manual update workflows break. Someone maybe pastes new data into the wrong place and then they overwrite a clean row, or someone inserts a column and shifts the layout so that the dashboard can no longer map the fields. Or maybe someone replaces the whole file instead of appending to it and then loses all the historical context in just one save. Now the automation prevents all of that by defining exactly what the system can and cannot touch. I then drop the March file into the input folder. Now the loop picks it up on the next pass, it runs the same cleaning process, and it appends the clean rows into the same CSV. Now the dataset now holds 112 total rows across January, February, and March, all sitting in the same file with consistent structure across every single row. I then open the dashboard in the browser, I upload the updated CSV, and the view expands. Now the revenue trend and the profit trend charts have real shape now because they are plotting a full quarter of movement instead of just a single month. Then I change the date filter again to pull up the middle slice of the quarter, and the whole dashboard updates itself. Now this is useful in practice because it lets me look at performance across any custom period without rebuilding anything or touching the underlying file. Now the same clean CSV supports the full quarter view and the narrower slice view from the same load. And that's the full system. Raw ERP exports go into an input folder, the cleaner standardizes them and then appends them into a single growing CSV. The automation layer runs the cleaner whenever a new file arrives, and then the dashboard reads from the same file every time without ever being rebuilt. The dashboard gets built once. The cleaning logic gets defined once, and after that, new months flow through the system on their own. Now, if you want the prompts or the instruction files and the data sets from this video, everything is free and it's in the community linked in the description below. And I'll see you next time.